Okay, so let's just dive right into this. Have you ever actually stopped to wonder what hidden force truly drives every single human action? And I'm not talking about the basic stuff, the need for food or water. I mean the profound underlying psychological engine of our entire lives. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating, honestly paradigm-shifting perspective on human nature. We're going to explore a theory that suggests all our bustling activity, our grandest ambitions, and even our deepest relationships, they all trace back to one single inescapable source.
So why do we truly seek out love, society, and meaning, right? Is it just some biological imperative, a desire for happiness, or is it something way more existential? Today we're exploring a source that really challenges the conventional wisdom about what motivates us. It suggests that our relentless pursuit of connection isn't necessarily about building something up. Actually, it's about running away from something that absolutely terrifies us.
This radical premise comes from a comprehensive analysis by philosopher and clinical therapist Ben Lazare Majuskovich. It's in his book, Loneliness in Philosophy, Psychology, and Literature. Majuskovich brings an incredible interdisciplinary approach to this whole topic, drawing on literally decades of research and clinical experience. And his core argument? Well, he posits that existential loneliness is the absolute universal principle of human consciousness.
So, here is the crucial point. All acts of consciousness and conduct are inevitably motivated by the wish to escape or evade loneliness. Just let that sink in for a second. According to Majuskovich, our primary drive isn't the pursuit of survival or success or even joy. No, it is a desperate, lifelong flight from isolation. Whatever humans do, whether it's creating art, building empires, or, just texting a friend, it all stems from this single fund of frightened psychic energy. And this idea gets even more groundbreaking when we compare it to one of the most famous psychological theories in history. We all know Sigmund Freud, right? He argued that human motivation fundamentally stems from the sexual drive, basically an instinctual push for physical gratification and union. But Majuskovich offers a really powerful counter-narrative here. He argues that this mutual need for companionship, the desire to meet, to communicate, to unify, is actually motivated by the instinct to overcome a desperate feeling of aloneness. We don't just want to gratify a physical urge, we literally want to bridge the terrifying gap between our mind and someone else's.
Section 1. The reflexive nature of consciousness.
To really grasp why we feel so incredibly isolated, we have to look under the hood of human awareness and examine the actual philosophical structure of our minds. Majuskovich bases his entire premise on a very specific definition of how the mind works. It's called reflexive consciousness, which is the mind's spontaneous ability to curl back upon itself and differentiate a separate self from the rest of the world. Think about it. The exact moment you become aware that you are thinking, you've drawn a boundary between yourself and literally everything else. This very act of self-awareness inherently isolates us. We become a solitary subject observing an external world of objects and other people. We essentially become an island.
To understand why this matters so much, our source outlines 3 dominant ways we've historically viewed the mind in Western thought. First, there's the reflexive model, which we just talked about, the self-conscious mind. Second, the empirical or behavioral model, which basically says the mind is just the physical brain, a biological machine reacting to stimuli. And third, the intentional or phenomenological model, which suggests consciousness is always directed outward at things, meaning intending, without really needing a central self. Majuskovich completely champions the first one, the reflexive model, as the absolute only true way to account for the phenomenon of loneliness. And this model brilliantly challenges that purely empirical physical view of the brain. It asks a pretty profound question. If the mind is just a brain communicating through chemicals, how can an electrical impulse feel lonely in a crowded room? I mean, if we are just biological circuits firing serotonin across synapses, the deep, agonizing pain of emotional solipsism doesn't fully make sense. A machine can't feel abandoned. There has to be a self-conscious entity, an I, that recognizes its own separation from others.
Moving on to Section 2, Myths, Literature, and Isolation.
Now, if this reflexive loneliness really is the absolute core of the human condition, we should definitely expect to see it woven into the stories we've told ourselves since the dawn of civilization. And, as our source reveals, we absolutely do. Just consider this quote from the ancient Vedic texts of the Upanishads. Therefore, a man who is lonely feels no delight. Therefore, the void which was there is filled by the wife. This ancient legend is so fascinating because it suggests that the drive to connect, even the very origins of romantic partnership, stems directly from an attempt to fill an existential void. We feel the emptiness of our isolated consciousness, and we reach out to another human being to basically plug the gap.
And we see this exact same concept popping up in ancient Greece, too. You might actually be familiar with Aristophanes' famous myth from Plato's Symposium.
He tells this allegorical story of original humans who are completely whole, but then they were split in two by angry gods. Ever since then, these bisected humans wander the earth, desperately yearning to find their other half and be rolled back into one. On the surface, sure, it's a story about love, but at its core, as our source points out, it's a depiction of our innate, unending quest to bridge the uncrossable gulf between human beings. We are absolutely terrified of being just a half.
So let's jump to the 20th century and see how this built in modern literature. Listen to this incredibly raw quote from the American novelist Thomas Wolfe. "Which of us is not forever a stranger and alone? We escape it never, 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 never." Wow, you can just feel the emotional weight there, right? This completely validates the philosophical concept we've been discussing, but in incredibly relatable terms. Because no matter who hugs us, who loves us, or who we talk to, there's a fundamental core of our being that remains a stranger, permanently locked inside our own heads.
Section 3. The illusion of escape. Because if we are fundamentally trapped in this isolation, what exactly are we doing with our lives? Well, according to the source, we spend it building elaborate, yet ultimately futile escape routes. Majuskovich highlights 3 major ways we attempt to transcend our mental limits. First, through intimacy and love, we try to merge our consciousness with another person. Second, through society and community, we build entire cities and cultures just to surround ourselves with others. And third, through religion and God. Our source argues that humanity creates an all-knowing, ever-present God precisely so we are never truly abandoned. We essentially invent an ultimate companion who can always read our minds, just so we aren't left all alone in the dark expanses of time and space.
And you know, sometimes we even try to escape our loneliness through inanimate things. Take George Eliot's classic novel, Silas Marner. Silas is this isolated hermit who obsessively hoards gold. Majuskovich uses this to demonstrate how accumulating wealth, or really any obsession with external objects, is often just a major distraction from the nothingness of the self. Silas identified his entire being with his gold just to avoid facing the deadening, terrifying emptiness of his own self-consciousness. It's a pretty powerful lens through which to view our own modern consumerism, isn't it?
Section 4. Embracing our existential solitude.
So, if escaping our reflexive consciousness is literally impossible, what are we left with? Well, we have to arrive at the profound reality of our unchangeable, essential nature. This realization definitely hits hard, but it's the absolute core of the source's message. Loneliness is not a disease to be cured by social reform. It is an unavoidable, absolute human condition to be faced. It's so easy in today's world to label loneliness as an epidemic, a modern illness caused by social media or the breakdown of communities. But this analysis impartially reports that this isolation isn't some modern influenza. It is the very architecture of our minds. You cannot cure it any more than you can cure the fact that you breathe.
And this fear runs incredibly deep. In fact, the true horror of death, according to this philosophy, is not nothingness. Actually, complete oblivion would probably be a relief. No, the ultimate terror is the fear that our consciousness might continue after death, and we will remain completely, absolutely alone for eternity. Think about it. Almost every conception of heaven or the afterlife involves being reunited with loved ones or with God. We are so terrified of isolated consciousness that it totally dictates our visions of eternity. So we arrived at this powerful, synthesizing quote from the source material. Each of us separately exists in isolation, in a state of desolate loneliness, enclosed within the confines of a monadic prison. Philosophers from Descartes to Kant have viewed human consciousness kind of like windowless islands, separated by uncrossable seas. We can wave at the other islands, we can send messages in bottles, but we can never truly leave our own island. We are permanently enclosed within our own minds.
All of this leaves us with a deeply provocative question for you to consider. If loneliness is the universal prism shaping every single action, if this drive connects everything from ancient myths to your latest text message, how will you choose to live within your monadic prison today? Because once you realize that the person sitting right next to you is fighting the exact same, desperate, lifelong battle against isolation, does it change how you treat them? Does it change how you understand yourself? It is a truly fascinating lens through which to view the human experience, and one that certainly leaves us with a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.